This is Gary Dick, and before we get to this week's episode of the Business and Beyond podcast, I want to tell you about the newest podcast from IBJ Media. It's called Off the Record with the Indiana 250. In each episode, IBJ Media CEO Nate Feldman talks with a different leader on the Indiana 250 list of the state's most influential leaders. They discuss their vision for Indiana's future, experiences in business, and advice for other aspiring entrepreneurs. New episodes are released on select Thursdays, so subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform and never miss an episode. Just search Indiana 250 Off the Record.
Ivy Tech really is Indiana's community college. Our mission is serving all the students of the state, the employers' needs, and the communities in which we serve.
Sue Ellspermann's middle name, well, it could very well be Serve. She's dedicated most of her adult life to Indiana higher education and state government.
I, Sue Ellspermann,
do solemnly swear
that I will support
the Constitution.
Former Indiana Lieutenant Governor and current president of Ivy Tech Community College, Dr. Sue Ellspermann, how growing up in the German Catholic town of Ferdinand helped pave a path for her to follow a life in public service. She's my guest this week on the Business and Beyond podcast. That's Sister Anita Louise Lowe playing the harp. She's a nun at one of the largest Benedictine communities in the United States. It's in Sue Ellspermann's stomping grounds, Ferdinand, Indiana, and Sue has likely heard that rendition of the Ave Maria. Ellspermann has come a long way from being the only girl in drafting class back in high school in a small southern Indiana town. She's leveraged her engineering skills to carve out stints at some corporate biggies, Michelin, Frito-Lay, and General Motors. Sue wound up back in Indiana serving as state representative before joining Mike Pence as his running mate on the gubernatorial ticket in 2012. After serving for nearly 4 years as lieutenant governor, Ellspermann took on the role of president of Indiana's largest college system. And it is my pleasure to welcome to the podcast this week Sue Ellspermann, the president of Ivy Tech Community College. And Sue, how are you?
I'm doing great. It is great to be with you, Gary.
So, we're heading into the fall season. There's probably, for all colleges and universities, but at Ivy Tech, maybe you have a little bit of a downtime, but is there an actual downtime or you're going full speed 24/7?
We are different than most traditional institutions in that we have 5 times a year where our traditional courses start. Fall is still the largest start of the semester, but we do 8-week courses. 85% of our courses are offered in that format, which is better for a working adult. So every 8 weeks, students can begin with us. But we are into fall. We still feel that fall, and it's been a very strong one again this year.
Well, Ivy Tech is the largest singly accredited statewide community college in the entire country. 177,000 students, 43 locations around the state. I think everyone's heard of Ivy Tech, but I don't think everyone knows the size, the breadth, what you cover geographically, but also just in terms of connecting with Hoosiers. And importantly, 40% of these students, your students, right, are first generation students?
Yes. And the fact that when Ivy Tech was formed as Indiana's community college, we were singly accredited, which means we're really one college. And I always say, what does that mean to Hoosiers? That means if I want to be a nurse, the nursing program in Evansville is the same as Indianapolis, is the same as Fort Wayne. And if life happens and I move to another part of the state, it's the same program, right? And for employers who need many robotics technicians, right? That AART program in one community is the same as another, and we can have several campuses supporting. We're doing that with semiconductors. We're doing that with biotech. We're doing that with battery technology. So it's a way to actually attract industry and help important industries, emerging industries, and those key employers in our communities grow because we can put 2, 3, 4, 5 Ivy Tech campuses all devoted to growing that talent pipeline.
You mentioned some of the newer economy areas like semiconductors and alternative energy, and obviously the auto industry is being electrified, going to the electric vehicles and those types of things, having a dramatic impact on the economy of the country and including here in Indiana. As you look at Ivy Tech's offerings, do you think people are aware that you are so ingrained, so into these new areas, that it's not just the more traditional areas, but some of these new areas of the economy?
Yeah, I think it is another one of those kind of secrets of Ivy Tech, but batteries. One of the reasons Indiana attracted the battery plants, semiconductors, others, is that Ivy Tech had already been the first community college to offer an Industry 4.0 degree. That is the smart manufacturing of the future, that fully integrated, connected factory. And that as the backbone to these high-tech emerging industries is incredibly important. And of course, that's just part of what we do, while we also do all the other things that industry needs us to do, whether it's culinary or IT. And I'd say staying in front of IT is a constant challenge to be where we need to be for industries, but we do them both. We have 75 different programs across the college. Now, not every one of our campuses offers every one of those programs. Again, our strength is making sure that we have the programs that are needed for the employers in those communities. But the power of Ivy Tech is really incredible, and the envy of most of the country. We're one of 2 states that have these fully singly accredited systems statewide, and it's a true competitive advantage. Good for Hoosiers who want to come here, great for industry, and amazing for the IEDC in our state as we're trying to attract industry here.
Well, you talk about attracting industry and the role that Ivy Tech plays. There is a direct link. In particular, I think a good example is the Stellantis Samsung SDI deal. A massive deal for an electric vehicle, an electric battery plant in Kokomo, $2.5 billion investment, 1,400 jobs. And I know you may have talked about it on the show some months ago, but you feel Ivy Tech was really critical in sealing that deal for Indiana.
Well, we were there from the beginning at the table. We were able to make the commitment to a great Korean employer that we could do the work. We've already trained 200 of their employees. It'll be another 500 over the next year. We've been to Korea to see the plants there. We're designing alongside, and I don't think it's coincidental that New Carlisle landed the second plant, because that will be a sister campus that will do that training, and we will be able to have the exact programs they need. I think that also helped with NTech, which is the battery separator plant that is coming to Terre Haute, $1.5 billion. Success builds upon success, and I think as I see it, it's incumbent on us to make sure that we live up to every expectation that the employers have. But Ivy Tech is very capable of doing this work.
In your view, because workforce is obviously such a critical issue all over the country, but certainly here in Indiana, how would you describe the state of workforce in the state of Indiana right now?
I think we have we know we're number one in manufacturing, right? So Hoosiers love to make things. We have the highest number of manufacturing jobs per capita of anywhere in the country. That's a competency we have. However, it's not in all places at the level of skill that it needs to be. We know that manufacturing is moving to Industry 4.0, which means even operators in those plants need more skill. So Eli Lilly, for instance, would love to get to a point where all of their operators have associate degrees, right? In most of the world, they do. that skill improvement is something that needs to continue. We're doing okay, and we need to do excellent if we're going to continue to attract these emerging industries. So that is our job. And we call it stackable, right? So you may start with a certificate and then go to a technical certificate associate degree, and then that associate degree being stackable to a bachelor's for those who need to continue on. That is just the way we think, and it's how we serve Indiana. But our workforce, both 18-year-olds as well as those that are 30 and 40-year-olds well into their careers, we want to help Hoosiers continue to skill up. The state has not yet achieved its big goal, which is that 60% of our workforce having a post-secondary degree or credential by 2025. We're at 54%, a little better than half of the states in the nation, but not where we'd like to be. I know the commissioner would like us to be at the top 10. So we still got headroom as a state if we want to have an economy that provides the kind of financial and community strength in the state that we want to live in. So we've still got plenty of headroom.
In terms of the culture, if you will, around this whole workforce idea in Indiana, there's been a lot said over the years that, Indiana's certainly blessed to have tremendous public and private higher education institutions, to be sure. But that mindset that if you don't go to a 4-year school, it's not the right path. You're not on the right path. When in reality, the jobs you're talking about, the training you're talking about, giving people, real careers in growing areas. Do you think that's changing? Do you think the mindset of Hoosiers is changing?
I think there's a realization that something's needed post high school, and I think parents and adults are still price shocked at what 4-year schools cost. And you're exactly right. Most of the jobs that are coming aren't going to require that 4-year or advanced degree, but they will require post-secondary. And that is the space we need to make sure that Hoosiers are ready to go, starting in high school with dual credit, dual enrollment, to help those students gain a first credential so that every graduate comes out with something that gives them a leg up in the workforce and a place to continue growing over their career. So are they there? I think it's a work in process. I think parents, when we did some branding work a few years ago, parents told us, they believed that they had to send their kids to 4-year, right? They still had that. However, that price shock of it says it's not affordable to many, and then they don't really know what to do. So we are affordable. A whole year at Ivy Tech is just $5,000 and change, right? So we know we're affordable. In fact, here's the stat I would love everyone to know. 4 out of 5 of Ivy Tech's graduates graduate with no debt, 0 debt. We have 300 employers who will pay for their employees to go back to Ivy Tech. Tuition assistance up front, nothing out of pocket. The state has generous aid. Federal Pell will more than cover Ivy Tech. So even if they want to go to a 4-year school, they want to be a doctor, they want to be a teacher, doing your first 2 years at Ivy Tech for that transfer option is another piece that I think sometimes families aren't sure, well, is it of the same quality? And I can tell them with full confidence, yes, we know it from the research that our own 4-year partners have done on our students. They come well prepared. The programs transfer. It is a smooth transition. Students succeed. So on all fronts, whether you're going into the workforce or whether you're transferring to a 4-year school, Ivy Tech is both high quality and affordable.
You rolled out an ambitious 5-year strategic plan back in 2018 and have just rolled out a new strategic plan, both with an overarching goal of getting to 50,000 Hoosiers annually with high quality certifications, certificates, credentials, as you said, post-secondary education. aligned with the needs of industry. That has always been kind of a sticking point. You hear the business community over the years, well, we're not getting the kind of talent we need out of the schools. They're not teaching what we need. And it was back and forth. Do you think that's going away? Ivy Tech, I know, has numerous partnerships with business and industry. Is that whole issue, in your view, being kind of straightened out here in Indiana?
I think our legislature has done a wonderful job in our Department of Education, our Indiana Department of Education, led by Secretary Katie Jenner. Those next level programs of study are lined up to industry. They start in high school. Those students can come out with a credential aligned. The next level jobs, which has now been in place 7, I believe, years. We have had more than 45,000 Hoosiers take those short-term credentials paid by the state, free to Hoosiers, mostly adults coming to those programs. And more than 25,000 have completed those degrees at Ivy Tech. Those are all aligned. In fact, they have to be aligned to qualify. So I would say our state has made some of the best progress of anywhere in the country. I know both of those programs are touted nationally for being aligned. And that's so important because the majority, at least we hope as parents, the majority of our young people will stay in Indiana. At Ivy Tech, 93% of our students stay here. So we want to make sure they're prepared for high wage, high demand, future leaning jobs and careers. And again, we're not there, but we are well on our path. And I would put Indiana against any state in the nation for the alignment we have to our employers. And I think that's the reason we keep the employers, the great employers that we have, the Lillys and the Cummins and the Rolls-Royce. They need and want and expect that. And I think our state is doing a good job at delivering, and Ivy Tech is absolutely committed to ensuring we're aligned.
Well, you became Ivy Tech president in July of 2016, right? So
yeah,
hard to believe.
It's been that long. I'm in my 8th year.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Well, and that marked really a return to education for you, because in terms of your background, you were a founding director of the Center of Applied Research and Economic Development at the University of Southern Indiana, USI, in Evansville. You also taught at USI, I think at UE, and others. Talk about that center, because I think the concept of that center at USI is a good one and an important one for Indiana.
Well, it was really a fun endeavor. I say I got to engage 600 faculty from the University of Southern Indiana in economic development work to help Southwest Indiana grow. So I come from a consulting background. I'd done 20 years of consulting prior, and along the way finished my doctorate. Always knew as I did that doctorate that I wanted to go into higher education. And being the founding director of the Center for Applied Research was just kind of the perfect job. We did everything from helping Dubois County put in their new jail, to economic impact studies on the new I-69 back in the day.
Wow,
when it was just a thought in our minds. It was not a road yet, but how would we ensure that we had the best outcomes in our communities when the interstate came? I've worked with, smaller organizations and nonprofits across. Habitat for Humanity was a great way to look at what was the impact of all the 300 homes that had been built in Evansville and the social and economic impacts of that. So lots of studies, lots of great projects, and really gratifying to be able to take the faculty wisdom, knowledge, expertise, and apply it to projects that would make a difference in Southwest Indiana. And as we all know, whether you come from Northern, Central, or Southern Indiana, we want our communities to thrive, and leveraging our higher education institutions to do that work in addition to the educating of our students and workforce is important.
Undergrad at Purdue, from Purdue University in industrial engineering, also a PhD and a master's from the University of Louisville in industrial engineering as well. So you were a pioneer of sorts. There weren't many, and there still aren't enough. I know there are a lot of efforts to get women in these engineering areas, but when you went through, you were a pioneer of sorts.
I knew that I didn't want to do what quote unquote women were allowed or expected to do.
Right.
When I graduated from high school, I loved drafting in high school. I just loved designing. I was good at math. And you know what? Literally one day I was in drafting and I was all the guys, because I was the only girl in the class, all the guys like, what are you guys doing? They were all going to be engineers. And so I sat back and thought, well, no one asked me. So I thought, I bet I could be an engineer, and talked to my dad. He was very supportive. Applied, the first place I applied was Rose-Hulman. Wanted to apply to Rose-Hulman. Of course, they weren't open to women back then.
At that time, right.
But ended up at Purdue, just a wonderful career choice. And I would encourage young women today, of course, engineering, STEM is so important. And it opened, literally, Gary, it opened the doors. I worked for General Motors, Michelin, Frito-Lay, grew up in manufacturing, would not trade those experiences for anything. And I use a lot of my IE today at Ivy Tech. We are a big system. I mean, all the things we need to do to be efficient, we need to be the best users of those taxpayer funds that we receive and the tuition that our students pay. We have to be the most affordable higher ed. And I use that all day long. And I feel sorry for my team sometimes because we are about working efficiently and effectively, high quality, great outcomes. And that was a good part of my background.
And your career ultimately, of course, returned to education, but also politics, as many people know, ultimately serving as Indiana's 50th Lieutenant Governor. We'll talk about that and much more when the Business and Beyond podcast returns.
At PNC Bank, we're committed to making a difference in the lives of our customers and communities by helping them move forward financially. As a Main Street bank, we try to do right by our customers with every encounter. Our local teams offer personalized financial advice to help guide you in making the best decision. We're proud to be part of your community. PNC Bank. See how we can make a difference for you at pnc.com. Copyright 2022, the PNC Financial Services Group, Inc., all rights reserved.
And welcome back to the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. My guest this week, Sue Ellspermann, the president of Ivy Tech Community College. And Sue, you are indeed an Indiana native, Southern Indiana, right? Ferdinand.
Born in Evansville, grew up in Ferdinand.
Dubois County. Talk about one of a big family too, right?
Well, 6 kids, which was, back in the day, we thought everyone had 6 kids in their family, right? We were a good German Catholic community, and there were lots of kids, baby boomers everywhere.
Yeah. Talk about growing up in Dubois County and what that was like.
Well, my dad had a small jewelry store on Main Street. So it was a great upbringing. There were 3 boys, 3 girls. The girls all worked in the jewelry store. Dad wasn't sure that boys would be so good. So that was my life in high school was, go to school, go down, work after school every night, weekends, summers, Christmas breaks, snow days. I said I never had a snow day because Dad would tell his others, like, you stay home, I'll take one of the girls with me, right? So it was a great upbringing, learned how to run a business, knew how to order, how to do the books, how to engrave, how to take care of customers, customer service being like the most important thing out of all of that. And then a great high school. Forest Park was a small school, a little over 100 students in a class. I ran track, but band was like, I was a band nerd, choral rifle in high school. It was just like a wonderful place to grow up. I can't imagine a better childhood than we had. It was truly a beautiful community. You're like, if you were caught speeding in town, that neighbor would call your parent and say, I saw your daughter driving too fast, right? That's how you were taken care of. Like you always had a community around you.
Yeah. Role models. Did you have particular role models? I'm sure you did, but as you think back on it, role models that really, really shaped you?
Yeah, probably a couple, in my younger years, there's no doubt it was like my high school band director, Jean Kaish, who just was a leader who motivated us to do things that we shouldn't have been able to do. We always were a state finalist in band. We were 1 out of 4 kids in the school marched in the band. I mean, it was just the thing you did. Later, as I grew up and came back to the area and worked, it was Pat Cook. Pat Cook, the matriarch of Holiday World, had been a nun in her early years, amazing force of nature in what she did in helping build Holiday World, bringing a parish to her community, St. Nicholas, working with the Sisters of St. Benedict, who are just incredibly close to my heart for the work that women religious have done in Southern Indiana, but across our country, educating millions of kids, including us. We, the other secret, we went to a public Catholic school, right? Oh. I didn't know till I was an adult that it was not a Catholic school. It was actually Ferdinand Consolidated School, but we were taught by nuns. The
really?
Was a nun.
Wow.
All of my teachers were nuns through grade school. And they were amazing at helping us become successful in our education, but also making sure we were good people, right? They weren't afraid to correct us when needed. And now I have the privilege of really spending time with the Sisters of St. Benedict, have been part of my consulting work over the years and just where I spend a lot of my personal passion.
Well, as mentioned earlier, Purdue, Louisville, education-wise, went into the corporate world with Frito-Lay, Michelin, and others. Ellspermann and Associates, your consulting firm that you created, but you ventured into politics. What got you into politics?
Well, some people would say I turned the wrong way in the road, but I was doing the work at the Center for Applied Research and working more with government. I had helped then Lieutenant Governor Becky Skillman do a rural strategic plan, and during that process realized I just didn't know how government worked. I'm an engineer. I didn't know those things, didn't pay attention in high school government class, and really felt like I needed to know more. And a colleague recommended the Lugar series, which is a program for women. Senator Lugar set it up with people like Teresa Lubbers supporting back in the day to get more women to come into public service. So I went through that series wanting to understand what good government looked like. And of course, no one did it better than Dick Lugar, right? So local, state, federal, and it was a great exposure. But at the end of that, got a phone call to ask me to run for office. I said, oh my gosh, I've run for nothing since high school student council, but thought about it, talked to now Senator, but back then, State Representative Mark Messmer, who was representing Jasper area. And anyway, the rest is history. I ran for state rep in 2010, was elected, and then 2 years later, got, again, who vets a 2-year state rep for lieutenant governor? But heck, I went to the sisters and we did some praying over that one. And, if God wanted me to serve in that capacity, I was willing, and it was a privilege to serve with Governor Pence.
Well, talk about that experience as lieutenant governor with Governor Pence. Again, you somewhat of a political novice. You were right at that point. What was that experience like?
It truly was amazing, and I think it was the perfect training ground for what I'm doing today. At the time, I certainly wanted to serve. Governor Pence, wonderful public servant, incredible individual, of course, who's done much more service for our nation since then. But the opportunity to serve Indiana, just for people to know, has one of the broadest roles for their lieutenant governors. Many states, it's just a holding tank, if you will, or holding cell for somebody. But here, you're Secretary of Agriculture. You oversee multiple agencies. You're president of the Senate, and you really have a chance to make a difference in the state. One of the responsibilities I had statutorily as well was to be the vice chair of the Indiana Career Council, which was legislation passed during our administration. And that had a lot to do with preparing me for Ivy Tech 4 years later, as we did Indiana's strategic plan of how in 2016 and 17 we're going to prepare us to have that skilled workforce and really prosperity for the state. That is why people go on for higher education. They want prosperity out of that. So that opportunity to serve and visit 92 counties. So my first year, I did the 92 county tour, getting to meet with local business leaders, but also elected leaders, and understanding the hopes and dreams and challenges of every community, and understanding the difference between a Gary, Indiana, and a Bloomington, and a Terre Haute, and a Jeffersonville, and every community. And that is probably the great gift that position gave me, was knowing Indiana and appreciating all parts of our state, and having a passion that every community in our state should thrive. That's part of our responsibility as public servants. And that's why at Ivy Tech, we get that privilege to help communities find their next great decade.
Are you concerned that some areas, for whatever reason, some areas of the state are kind of being left behind, or are really facing challenges that maybe they can't overcome?
Well, no doubt, I think, again, coming out of manufacturing, we all saw the disinvestment and the offshoring of manufacturing jobs during the 80s and 90s. And to no fault of the citizens, their communities changed. Now we have the opportunity, and Indiana is in the best seat in the nation with our capabilities around manufacturing. But I'll give you, for instance, East Chicago is one of those communities. While the General Assembly was never able to fund that priority project for us, we made the decision at Ivy Tech to put, along with some very good donors in the area, we're putting $15 million into that technology facility because that community needs and deserves the best high post-secondary we can provide. And that is paying dividends to support the industry. I'm hopeful, knock on wood, that they're in contention for one of the big hubs that might be awarded, and we need to be ready to go. I'm passionate about our theme, higher education at the speed of life, of this new strategic plan, which means we can't wait to renovate facilities. If people see me shaking bushes across this state, looking for donors and industry partners, we have to make sure that every one of those Ivy Tech facilities across the state is state of the art to do what's needed, exactly for what you've said, Gary, to bring every community back. It is that skilling up of our workforce to meet the needs of emerging technologies and where their existing employers want to grow. And we're going to do it. But yes, that is, if there's one thing that I want to be able to say I did when my working days are over, it will be to help those communities, all communities, see their better tomorrow.
You submitted your resignation to Governor Pence in 2016, and you did so, as I look back on, I remember the quote, you did so with a conflicted heart. What was that decision-making process like?
It's kind of hard to go to your governor and say, Governor, I think there's a better seat on the bus for me. So President Tom Snyder had announced his retirement in late 2015, and I had some trustees and others approach me about would I be interested in becoming the president. And again, my first notion was, no, I'm Lieutenant Governor. We're running again. We're going to have another administration. And yet the more that sat on my heart, the more I knew where my strengths were, where I could make maybe a bigger difference for Indiana. Being governor had never been on my bucket list of things to do. If I had been called to serve, I might have done it, but knowing and understanding at that point what Ivy Tech meant to Indiana and what good work it was doing and what more it could do and should do was something that just by the end of 2015, I went to the governor and we had multiple meetings to talk about if that was the best thing, but he agreed with me, and the rest is history. I was the first lieutenant governor ever to step down. I stepped down with no job. It was an election year. The governor needed a lieutenant governor. The actual interview process hadn't started. So I had a couple months of, knowing that there was no promise, but I had plan B and plan C. I knew there were other opportunities in Indiana. It worked out beautifully. Could not be happier. I do feel like this is the best seat on the bus for me in Indiana, and I absolutely love our mission and the work. I'm privileged every day to work with amazing Hoosiers that have a passion for our students, our communities, and for making this a better state.
Well, Sue Ellspermann, it's been a real treat chatting on the podcast this week. Thanks for all you do for not just for Ivy Tech, but it's very important for Indiana, and your service, your passion for service obviously came through in our talk today. So really appreciate it and hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Gary. It's been my pleasure. Keep doing what you're doing as well. Your work, IBJ, are incredibly important to our state.
Great. Thanks very much. Sue Ellspermann, the president of Ivy Tech Community College. My guest this week on the Business and Beyond podcast, presented by PNC. It is a weekly conversation with achievers in business, sports, entertainment, and beyond. And you can download all episodes of the Business and Beyond podcast and get Indiana business news 24/7. All you have to do is go to InsideIndianaBusiness.com. I'm Gary Dick. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.